Let's call to order the Tuesday, March 19th meeting at 4 o'clock. And let's have a motion on the minutes. It's moved and seconded. All those in favor, contrary, carried. Our next committee meeting is April the 3rd. And we're looking at amendments to the building regulations. Who is doing that? James, are you on for that? Yeah, good. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Have anything you want to highlight for us? Or?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Do we have any questions on the building code and stuff? Carol? Okay.
Thank you very much for the report, Mr. Cooper. Sorry, now you can hear me too. So the one that I'm a little concerned about is that work authorized by permit that's not completed within 2 years of the original date of the permit. Mm-hmm. When people are living in a neighborhood and they have constant construction, 2 years is just too long. What can we do about bringing that down considerably? I recently had 2 houses built right across the street from me, and they were done within 6 to 8 months. So why are we giving that kind of leeway for 2 years in an existing neighborhood?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor Day, it's just through our experience over the last 10 years that sometimes events that's beyond the constructor's control takes too long. So, but we do have in our bylaw that that there are limitations to how long that construction can be dormant in between inspections. And as part of this package, we are becoming more strict on that.
So 180 days is 180 days. The project can sit dormant?
Yes.
That's a long time.
Well, that's the bylaw that is commensurate. It's an item that is commensurate to all construction in the city. So there have been times when on larger projects that the bylaw, that 180 days was required.
So not to beat this to death, but is there a difference between, like building a huge development with Ani or with the Lansdowne and someone in a neighborhood? I mean, obviously a big project can take 2 or 3 years, I get that. But do we not have any differentiation between those two different types of construction?
To Councillor Day, through Mr. Chair to Councillor Day, we do have, as per further in our items, we do have items that address some of those issues that, in terms of the factors that would stall a project. Generally, we have, as part of our revisions to the bylaw, allowed for closer scrutiny of dormant projects, but at the same time, we also realize that there are factors that are outside of the constructor's control, and to expire a permit halfway through also has its disadvantages, because then the community is stuck with a half-built or a quarter-built construction with no way of proceeding.
So then let's move to penalties. I noticed that, for example, on page 18, if you the failure to remove a temporary building after a period of 1 year or as directed by the inspector has a penalty of just $500. You could probably rent that place for $2,000. Is that per day or just?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair to Councillor Day, that's the BVN provision, and that's per day.
Per day.
Yeah.
Good. That makes it. So, is there a way that we could write a bylaw that requires that when someone is building a 1 or 2 dwelling unit in a residential area, that it must be completed within 1 year?
through the chair to Councillor Day, yes, it is possible if that's the wish of committee.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thanks, and through the chair. Thank you for the report. I'll be very brief, not even really a question. I like a lot of the content of the report, and I like the fact that it places time limits on it. I've had a couple complaints from residents about the length of time it takes some houses to be completed, so this will help address that. I think it can take a little over a year sometimes, because some things, although the point is taken, some things are beyond people's control sometimes when it comes to labor and supplies and that kind of thing, or financing perhaps even. But I really like the fact, and I do believe, as it states here in 4B on page 9, that it will help to diminish the kind of placeholder permits that are there with nothing happening. So I think this is a lot of really good steps forward, so thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seconded. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the Richmond Heritage Commission 2023 Annual Report and Work Program and Budget Allocation for approval. John, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to add. Happy to answer any questions.
Answer questions? Who has? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Thank you very much. Appreciate the briefness of your report. Okay. The next item as added is the housing agreement for 10545 to permit the City of Richmond to secure affordable housing units at 6851 and 71 Elmridge Way. And we've got Greg Newsom down. Anything to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the report presents a housing agreement for 35 low-end market rental units at the subject property, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any? Seeing none, motion? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Cash, sorry.
I'm usually not here, but the reason I'm here is because of the lemur discussion today. And so I'll start this out. It's going to carry over to the next discussion. I think you have a sense of where I'm going on this. And just to clarify, this land development got in just under the bar before it went to 15%. Am I correct in assuming that? Because they were 10% on total lemur. I think it was, the cutoff was very fine in my recollection of this. And I see that the copy of the agreement is here. I understand that they have a housing society that is going to manage and develop the 35 lemur units. And I understand that there's a breakdown on the maximum rent charge. And I think I'll just make a comment with respect to this, and I think we can deal with it when we talk about the next thing around what we're going to do with lemur is, in the City of Richmond. I understand that declarations, stat decks are sworn by the people that are going to be occupying these things. And I guess my question that I'll put in this round here is, do we do any other inquiries with respect to the validity of that declaration, such as do we do anything with CRA, say, for over the past 5, 10 years or whatever, to verify that? And the reason I'm asking you this question, and Mr. Ursig, I think knows that my feelings on this is so much information is coming forward to me from people, including as of this morning, that are telling me that many of the people that are within our lemur units are not people that have lost their housing or have gone out of their housing in Richmond. They've been long-time Richmond people. One lady gave me an example of 50 years, and she couldn't get a low-end market rental in Richmond. She ended up in Prince George. So that's all part of the problem that we look at. So I guess the question right now is, do we do anything beyond just taking a statutory declaration and taking the word of that individual? Do we do any other exploratory review?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Heed. We do the statutory declaration, which is a notarized response to a city prompt to confirm household income in addition to the max rents that's being charged. So that is the extent of it. It is a 2-year biannual review.
So that's it. We don't do anything beyond that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say that we maintain a regular dialogue with our nonprofit and our other property managers to make sure they're abiding by the terms and conditions of our housing agreements.
Thank you. And my next question I'll ask now, and then I'll reserve it for the next one, is do we keep statistical data with respect to the people that are occupying our lemur in Richmond, what their history is? For example, like the individual that I told you that lived here and raised their family for 50 plus years, then had to go elsewhere. Do we keep any of that information at hand so we can determine whether or not it's actually Richmond people that are gaining access to lemur?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Heed. No, we don't validate or verify that the tenants are Richmond-based prior to occupying a lemur unit.
We leave it up to the nonprofit.
We leave it up to the operator of the unit.
Thank you.
No, I don't have any additional comments other than, I guess I do have an additional comment. What staff do is they follow the housing agreement, and it doesn't provide for some of what has been suggested. So for instance, the CRA, et cetera. What you would need to do is review the city position and policy on the actual housing agreements for new units. And coming back to this application, yes, these folks, they were grandfathered. I think they had a year from third reading to go under the old standards of provision.
Thank you, Carol. Go ahead. You're on. Oh.
There we go.
There we
We're
are.
happening now. Thank you very much for the report. On PLN 61, there's a graph, and it says it's a statutory declaration. And if we follow the example that has been provided, the before tax total income, if occupant is 18 years or over, provide one response per occupant. And so you've got a $31,000, a $22,000, and a $7,800 income for 3 individuals. That's not near good enough. The developers I've spoken to are hoping that we're going to develop a housing authority because they think, and I have to agree with them, and this is them coming up with this idea, we should have 3 years income tax forms supplied, not just mentioned on a single line, but actually copied and supplied to the city so that we can confirm they didn't just transfer all their worldly assets to a friend or a neighbor or another child. They actually deserve and need affordable housing. So my question is, if this is it, I think we need to do better. Would there be any reason we couldn't duplicate this page 3 times and require, 2022, 2023, and 2021 declarations?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor Day, there's no reason we couldn't do that.
Okay. Do we have to send all this back to do that, Mr. Ersic, or can we just do it on this application and move forward with the new process?
The application that you actually have, I'm going to separate out this item from the Lima referral because they are different. What you have is a rezoning, and there was an agreement as part of that rezoning to put a housing agreement, this housing agreement, the content of this housing agreement in place as part of that rezoning. So I'm not giving legal advice, but my opinion is that you have an agreement for a rezoning based on this housing agreement. if you, and I think that you should consider approving this housing agreement.
Okay.
If you want to revisit the conditions around Lima, the content of housing agreements, that I think is a separate exercise.
Okay, so maybe we'll just go ahead with this one and then move forward with new plans. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for the help.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? Recommendation's been moved, seconded. All those in favor, contrary, carried. Okay, the next item is the low-income market rental LEMUR program and management unit. And, oh, you're doing this one as well. Okay, sorry, I didn't have that down. You're on. Anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a few opening comments. So the City of Richmond has been a leader in the region in securing affordable housing for low and moderate income households. Since 2007, the city has been able to see constructed over 530 LEMUR units, and there's another 820 or so that have received approval from council. In 2017, the affordable housing strategy was updated, and through that update, there were updates to the affordable or to the low-end market rental housing program, the LEMUR program. The changes have helped to ensure that housing in Richmond remains within reach of low-income households, and in particular, households that need family-friendly housing with 2 or 3 bedroom units. The success of the city's LEMUR program is evidenced by the ongoing increase in the number of LEMUR units the city is securing. With more LEMUR units under construction, the program is helping to address the pent-up demand for affordable housing in the city. This report provides a response to Council's referrals as they relate to the structure and management of the LEMUR program. The report offers 4 LEMUR unit and program management options for the committee and ultimately Council's consideration. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm just going to make a comment. A good report in terms of all. I've made, I'm proposing a motion and a referral to staff on how we deal with LEMUR. And if we give up all our options to BC Housing, nobody in Richmond will ever get a home. And I guess that's why I've given it to other staff members, and I want committee to have a look at it. And what I suggested, and I'm going to read it, it was to review the existing policy that gives preference to nonprofit housing operators for LEMUR units with a view to allow large and small developments to manage their own LEMUR units or that could be other, and the staff consult with BC Housing in order that Richmond residents get first preference to occupy, and the staff examine the process for Richmond to establish their own housing authority. So obviously that referral, correct me, Mr. Ursic or Mr. Craig or anybody in the legal department, I don't know if anybody's here, that would go contrary to what's on the table. Especially number one, we're going to let BC Housing do it all. And I'm saying that isn't where I want to go with it, because I don't think, knowing what BC Housing does, knowing what Metro Vancouver has to do with regard to its units and follow BC Housing, you're literally trapped in how you administer housing throughout the Lower Mainland. So anyhow, that's how I read it, and I'd be open to your thoughts on that. Are we not trapped if we ask them to secure and manage and operate the existing future LEMUR units? They would be in sole control, correct?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps I can weigh in on this one.
Yeah, please.
So we got a referral to, a couple of referrals, I guess, to look at how LEMUR is administered. We have done that, and there are some options in the report. We're recommending not that we go with BC Housing. All we're really doing is recommending that you give us a green light to engage in discussions with BC Housing. What we have discovered is that in some other municipalities that perhaps have similar housing, they have a model where BC Housing manages the wait list and that type of thing. So it's not a done deal. We would simply be looking to have conversations with BC Housing and then bring back the results of those discussions to you for consideration. You know, I do think that makes sense. If I understand the motion that has been added today, that is a little bit different in that I think what it's suggesting is, like, currently the council policy is that where a developer clusters units, because the council policy is actually that these units should be sprinkled throughout developments. But the preference, sorry, the policy, the existing council policy, though, allows when units are consolidated together, say in a separate building, the council policy requires or strongly prefers that there be a non-profit operator. So that's current policy. I think this motion is suggesting that we revisit that policy to maybe loosen it up so that for some projects it's not a non-profit operator. So I actually see the recommendations coexisting. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
All right, well, then I would support, because we are consulting, but after I'd like to move my referral motion and put it on the floor as well. Okay, I have Cash next.
Thank you, Chair. There's no motion on the floor right now because I'm a little, and maybe clarity would help me on this. I've got the
We're
report to
asking
council
questions.
here with respect to what is going on. I'm asking the chair for clarification to see what's on the floor because we've talked about this matter. This is probably the fourth or fifth time that we've, as a council or committee, have spoken with respect to what we want to do with the Lemur units. So I have this report to council, and I believe there were 4 recommendations or opportunities for management of the Lemur units here, and that staff had recommended option number 3, which I think that's what you're referring to here on the BC Housing one. I don't necessarily agree with option 3. However, I'm just need clarification whether you are doing an amendment here or you're just adding an additional opportunity.
To answer that, as I read it, and clarification from Mr. Ersick, we're going to engage in discussions and see what they have to say, and it'll come back. And we will also explore things and come back. And mine would be a separate one. They would also follow up and do it and come back. And then we would come up with a policy of where we are going with our Lemur units.
So would you make that referral after this discussion we have on this report
after we
for
do the
council?
staff
Okay,
report, because these are basically consultation.
Okay, so I can comment on the report to council that's in front of us with respect to this if you want at this time. I'm not sure if the motion's on the floor or not.
Well, somebody want to move it, put it on the floor for discussion? No? Okay. All right, then ask questions of staff.
So not to repeat what I've said, you know, my general opinion with respect to what we do with the Lemur program, how we manage it in Richmond. And, you know, it is my opinion and belief that we could get better value for the people in Richmond if we actually took this in-house. And if you go to page number 69 out of this report, where you have the 4 options there, and in the option that I think holds most value for the people that are affected here in Richmond is option number 4, the allocation of new staffing resource to manage all existing and future Lemur units and administer the Lemur program. So that is what I prefer. And so the question I have with respect to this is, currently with the nonprofits that the developers are bringing on board to manage their Lemur units, they would receive a percentage of the rent. Do we know what that percentage generally is? Just a range?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor No, I don't know what that percentage would be.
So that would be, because they're not doing it for free. We know that. They're getting it. And I'm just trying to, if we did take this in-house, we came up with our authority to deal with Lemur in my opinion, again, a more effective way for the people that are affected here in Richmond on housing, that there would be some cost recovery from the developer based on the Lemur units. So Mr. Ursig, would you be able to comment?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, I think that each project is probably different, and we are not party to those details. In some cases, the non-profit may get a management fee with the developer retaining ownership. I believe that in other situations, the non-profits actually purchase the Lemur units with the housing agreement in place and receive funding either privately or from other levels of government. But many of the limitations in terms of managing these units continue because the city isn't the owner of the unit, and it seems to me that the housing agreement terms currently don't go as far as perhaps, certainly some members of committee would like, and I'm not sure, whether that's the majority of committee and the majority of council, but so some of the things that have been talked about today, like the additional scrutiny of income and that sort of thing, it's just outside the scope of the current housing agreements, and you would have to consciously, as a council, decide to modify those agreements to do more in terms of managing the Lemur units.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Alexa.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the report. Considering option number 2, the retention of a third party to manage. So if there were a third party managing it, let's say we got Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, they could run it, they could run the list. Then they could also run the list and keep concurrently a list of people who, say, require fully accessible units. And then we could have a better idea of what our needs are within the city of Richmond in serving people who need fully wheelchair accessible spaces where you can wheel in right into the shower, that kind of stuff. And then we would also have the ability, because it's at arm's length, that if anything goes wrong with it, it's not the city of Richmond wearing it. So not all renters are equal. And if the city were to say no to a renter, it could be problematic for us as a city because for some reason we're saying no to them. But if we said yes to that renter and they end up wrecking the place or being unruly to the whole building, then that causes a problem too from the other side, right? So there's liabilities on either direction that the city perhaps might be under. And I don't know that you can comment on either of those things, but maybe you could.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Liu, the one comment I'll make is that right now the city is a third party to the tenant operator owner relationship. So we are not part of that conversation of the adequacy of the tenant, the needs of the tenant, the suitability of the maintenance of the unit, and that sort of detail.
Okay. So the difference between, say, BC Housing doing it and some other third party doing it, what's the merit between the two?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor Liu, I think it really depends on what we would get out of the independent Lemur unit manager. The approach that we would take if that were the direction of council would be to do an RFP and to look at the background of the organizations that would put their name in the hat to take on that responsibility. So I think then council would have to look at, well, how do those candidates compare with the services that BC Housing might be able to offer?
Okay, so if we opened it up to RFP and BC Housing could be one of the proponents on it and other people could be the proponents on the same third party, then there could still be one place where people can apply. That being said, if you're one of those people and you apply and you don't get accepted and you get notified that you're not accepted, then I guess you're done in Richmond and that's the end of your day and move on. But Or I guess you can go to other places, like individual ones, and try differently. Okay. Because I think part of our goal is that we want one place for people to apply in Richmond. And then we also want sort of a fairness in terms of who has applied, how long they've been sitting on this list. And then I think we also, for me anyway, I'm quite concerned that we make sure that we have available spaces and we're building enough spaces for people that are fully accessible or provide different needs. Because once we're kind of at that critical mass where we know that we have at least a certain percentage of people who are in wheelchairs. Instead of having them sitting on a wait list for 2-3 years, whatever it is, we could push those through, provide housing for everyone in Richmond in a sequential basis. So I think either one of those might be the way to go, but I think maybe putting it out for RFP between BC Housing, a private operator, and seeing what it looks like, and then we can decide if we can come in better than that.
Okay, Andy?
Thanks, and through the chair. Well, first of all, thank you for the report. There's a lot of good news in it too, actually, like the tables 1, 2, and 3. I was really impressed with how we come in terms of rent. I know it's all expensive, rent is expensive, but in terms of comparing us to the market rental rates, I think we seem to be doing well there, although of course it's still expensive. I think what a lot of people have said, I agree with a lot of it. What we're looking for is effective management of it that meets the needs of Richmond residents as a primary goal, one-stop shopping, so to speak, so people know what's available. I think those are all laudable goals. I think in terms of how we get there, I don't know the answer to that yet, so I'm looking forward to whatever comes of this meeting with whatever referral happens. I also think that in the report, it mentions something that I think will be very good, and I don't know if other people agree with it, but when I look at the household income thresholds, I find them to be kind of remarkably low. So I think that is a good thing to have a review on, because I can see 2 people or 3 people in a household working even at modest rates, exceeding that before long. So I think that would be a good thing for us to have a review of, and I know it is in the report, so that's good. I'll just get to my question now. It struck me that the compliance rate cited in the report of 93% is actually pretty high in terms of a compliance rate. So, and actually Councillor Heed brought up some of the questions or points I want to have explored a bit more in terms of how do we establish that compliance rate? You've already mentioned the statutory declaration. I thought there was a bit more that went into that other than just having that notarized. So is there more to explain, or have you already explained it when Councillor Heed was asking his questions and making his points? Because I think that's an important thing. 93% is high. So what goes into it, and how accountable are people to that? And maybe what are a couple examples of what resulted in non-compliance? And maybe is there an example of what happens to somebody who's in non-compliance?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hobbs. A couple things, I guess. So the statutory declaration process is intended to ensure compliance with the terms of the Affordable Housing Agreement. So the package that we just looked at with Elmbridge, there's a table that we send out to the property manager. They confirm the income that is being charged to the tenant, and then they also acknowledge through their statutory declaration that they are abiding by the terms and conditions of the agreement, which would be they're not overcharging for rent, and they're not charging for other fees like staff, strata fees or move-in, move-out fees. So we have achieved a really high level of compliance, 93%. Where there were areas of non-compliance, they were, for the most part, to do with income exceedances, and the vast majority of those income exceedances were tied to the receipt of payments, income sort of supplements as a result of the COVID pandemic. So people got COVID-related supports, financial supports, and that put them over the threshold. We also had a couple landlords that had charged move-in, move-out fees, so those were addressed. So there have been a resolution of the areas of non-compliance resulting from the follow-up on the stat deck.
Well, those areas of non-compliance seem like areas where we'd want to use a lot of discretion when it came to enforcing things, because the pandemic was, a completely separate chapter in all our lives. So That's good. I'll just end with this comment. I think when it comes to compliance, as was mentioned before, if there's different ways that can be built into whatever the process is to ensure accountability and transparency and making sure that the Lemur units that we build are going to the people that most use it, I think that's what we're looking for. So I look forward to seeing what we have as a referral. Thank you very much.
Okay, Carol?
I didn't want this motion as written to go on the floor because I couldn't possibly support it, especially as a 1 and 2. It would have to be separated. My problem with this motion that we've been asked to accept is that it doesn't really follow the direction that the motions initially said back into 2023. I think that option 2 is the closest to being what we need here in Richmond, which is securing an independent Lemur program manager and to manage existing and future Lemur units. And then we need a centralized registry and a wait list. We need a city-appointed manager who will go into the details that we've mentioned earlier, which is, for example, 3 years of income tax statements. I don't think a declaration signed by a notary is near enough due diligence, because I know of incidents where people have gotten in because they knew somebody. And when you look at the Lemur list of managers, there's everybody from real estate agents to investing companies that are the managers for any particular Lemur unit, and that's just not acceptable. It's pretty easy to see how that could be abused. So I think we need a separate entity, and it states on page 70 that, here we are, that it would be an opportunity to voluntarily retain the city-appointed program manager, and that the city could invite the Lemur unit owners to voluntarily participate in the use of the central registry and shared wait list. That's going to clean things up really quickly. And I believe that engaging, on one hand, it said on the motion, it says to authorize to engage in discussions, but if you actually look at option number 3, which is on page 71, it says securing BC Housing to manage Lemur housing, recommended. So the motion on the table, or that's not on the table, thank goodness, doesn't come close to what it actually says under option 3. So I've been to BC Housing complexes, gone door knocking and talked to different people, and they're horribly run. I mean, the one at Rosewood, I mean, it just looks like a big junk pile, and there's no maintenance, and I'm not impressed with BC Housing. I also have a friend who worked for BC Housing who told me horror stories that I can't repeat because they're so awful. So to put our faith in BC Housing, it doesn't do anything for me whatsoever. I'd much rather secure a independent Lemur project manager, and if they don't do a good job, we'll fire them and get somebody else. So let's clean up this situation. The Lemurs are way too important to not be managed effectively, and to make sure that, as it says in option 2, that it says that to ensure that those with the greatest needs are being provided access to Lemur housing. That says it all right there. There are people with really desperate needs, and they're the ones that we're building them for, and we got to make sure they're the ones that get it. So as much as I appreciate Councillor McNulty's motion, because it's got BC Housing in it, I'd have to have it amended. So I'm wondering if we just can't go with option 2, which is securing an independent Lemur program manager to manage existing and future Lemur units, and maintaining a list, and then we can, through the process to find an operator, let them know what we need. And for me, I would need 3 years of income tax statements. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ersick, and I want to make a comment and wrap it up.
Mr. Chairman, just on the comment regarding, that the report appears to presume that BC Housing would be the operator or manager, that actually isn't intended. The report is consistent with the recommendation. All the staff are recommending is that we explore with BC Housing their role potentially in managing the Lemur units, and if you don't have an appetite to do that, then you could just run with number 2, which is that we explore others that might perform that function, and then bring it back to you for consideration. But there's nothing here that assumes or guarantees that BC Housing would be the manager.
Thank you, Mr. Ersick. I'm just going to make a comment again and let you know. I think we can go ahead with number one, to be quite frank with you, because with exploration, as my referral motion is as well. And the reason I brought that forward, we're limiting ourselves to BC Housing. What we got right now is not working, okay? And it doesn't work for Metro Vancouver either. And there are 1,836 people on a list. Top person goes off, could have been from anywhere in the province of British Columbia. They get the subsidy down at Manoa Village, down in Steveston. And somebody from Cranbrook can move into Steveston as well because they're on the list, they're number 2 on the list, etc. It doesn't work. We need to find something that works. Mine is suggesting, and I've heard from developers, they'd like a choice. When they've got, give Lemur, next door is all their market rental, they want somebody who's qualified that's going to keep that place going, and that's what they wanted. They want a qualified operator to administer their properties. They're not necessarily, they're groping out there right now because some of the nonprofits, for example, can't do it. And we are struggling. If you start looking at all the nonprofits that are administering the Lemur within our community, we're struggling. We've got downtown coming in here, for example. You got provincial organizations, and and if we really truly believe in Richmond first, I like that term, it's not the current policy. It's not the current policy. And who administers, look at the issues over at Toon Blundell in BC Housing. The towers over there. The drug problems, the other problems that are happening. And what they say, oh, we can't call the RCMP. It's not our job. That's the kind of operator we got over there, okay? I've got people sitting in the cafeteria with me complaining about safety over there with their kids and stuff. So we need to refer this back, in my opinion, to staff to look at it and look at all the options, not just BC Housing. Look at the ones that are possibly successfully running some of our Lemur already. There are some good ones out there. Those are the ones that we should be bringing forward to say, let's say it's just for sake of argument, it's a women's YMCA. Well, maybe they'll take on more and run more for us. Maybe they're the best operator we've got, but at least we look at it, and that's really what my motions to add to these says. And also examine the process for our own housing authority. We can't just jump into it. I think we got to come up with a process. Not that I disagree, it's not going to happen overnight. But I think we should look at it. And it may come back, yes, we should do it, or no, we shouldn't. And that's how I see it from my point. We want to make it work. And that's the thing, we're going every meeting to every meeting, and where the same discussions come out, no disrespect to staff, you've done a good job. Okay, so it's us, it's the problem. Okay, if there is. So I think there's no rush to get this done, but I'm wondering if this was referred back, and then I'll put my motions on the floor, could it be done within 3 months? So we get something back to staff, whoever can ask that. Could it be done within 3 months? To have some discussions?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that I'm clear on the scope of what it is that we would do. So it's hard to say whether it can be done in 3 months. Currently, what we're recommending is that we talk to BC Housing to see whether there's an arrangement where they might manage the units. And we're recommending that if that doesn't work out, that we then look at other groups that could potentially fulfill that role. I'm not quite sure what you would be doing by referring it back. I'm not sure what the scope of that referral would be. So it's very hard to say whether we could do it in 3 months or not.
Okay. Councillor Heath.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we've got to delineate some of the things here. BC Housing and Rosewood a little different. That's BC Housing exclusive, and I admit they are, to use a lack of a better term, trashy-looking places and trashily kept places. So I agree we need to have discussion with BC Housing, so when they have those types of complexes, we get the Richmond people in it first. Absolutely, that conversation needs to take place. Moving forward on the lemur of what we need to do, and I'm a little still unclear on the amended motion or the referral motion putting forward, is what difference is there than what we have right now when you look at opportunity number one of maintaining the status quo, because we have a list of operators that the developers could go to and utilize to run their lemur units. Councillor Day brings forward something very good under option 2. I think, again, I'm not on this committee, so I'll have a vote when it comes to council, but not here. But I've got to tell you, it makes total sense where we start to manage it in a different fashion versus, there may be 1 or 2 or 3 operators out there, but having someone that's going to coordinate much of what is going to be required. And, maybe that's the, listening to Councillor Liu is, the city may not want to take this on by itself, but if we could find a qualified operator that has the credibility to do this, and whether it comes out of our social planning management area or whatever in the city, to oversee that, to make sure that it remains credible, it delivers on what council's expectations are for the people of Richmond, whether they're people that have some disability or some other problem that we're requiring in our housing. So, I have to agree that option 2 may be the one where staff goes back and they look at that and they come forward with the recommendations with respect, working within those guidelines under option 2. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess my question to the committee, what are you prepared to do? And the referral motion shouldn't interfere at the moment because it's not on the floor. Just to explain it. And the part of it is looking at a housing authority. Okay, Carol, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to go with option 2, and I'd like to explain why. Can I do that first, or do you want me to?
Well, I'm just trying to look at the propriety that changes the whole thing.
If I could give my arguments, like option
Okay,
1
you
is
can
status.
speak. Yeah.
Sorry, option 1 is status quo. That's not acceptable. Option 2 is securing an independent lemur program operator that can work with nonprofits, that can work with everyone that we want them to work with. That, I think, is the best option. Option 3 is securing BC Housing to manage lemur housing. That's not acceptable to me. That's the recommended option. I can't go with that. Option 4 is the City of Richmond staff management of lemur program. I think we've just demonstrated that we don't really have the capability of doing that. And it clearly says that, we would have to hire more people. And I like what Councillor Liu said. She said, if we have an arm's length operator and someone is not on the waiting list, doesn't qualify, it's a separate operator that's making that decision, not the City of Richmond. And that's why I don't think option 4 works. I think that if we really look at it, what we want is management of those lemur units, and then we can give the direction through the procurement process to let them know exactly what the job will be. So I think it makes the most sense. And then if down the road, if we move forward with this, it says that if this option is approved, that staff will engage candidate housing managers and present council with a framework and costs to further consider this opportunity. So we're just starting the process. And if we go with option 2, then they will go back, do all the homework, and hone it down to something that's a workable option. And then we end up with what we want, which is a centralized registry, a centralized waiting list. We have preference to people who are born and raised in Richmond. And we're going to have an option for nonprofit operators to continue as they do now. And I think it's the most well-rounded option, option 2.
Okay, I guess my question on that is what waiting lists and what are you going to do? Because right now, everybody goes to BC Housing List, which Richmond residents don't have priority. If you want to do the province, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, anyhow, Mr. Ursick?
In listening to the discussion at committee, if you'll permit me, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Okay, we'll accept it because we haven't got one right now.
So looking at the staff recommendation on the report, the first part of it was to go and chat with BC Housing. If a majority of committee members don't want to do that, you would just take that off the table. Number 2 of the staff recommendation, this is on page 62 of the agenda package. My suggestion would be, I think what I'm hearing is that you would like us to explore an independent coordinating manager. So it could be something like, and I'm just kind of on the fly wordsmithing this, it could read something that along the lines that staff explore via an expression of interest opportunities to retain an independent organisation to manage the LEMA program and report back to council following this exploration. I don't think it needs to, so that could be, a suggested wording for a motion. I think implicit in that, I don't think it needs to be explicit in the resolution, would be that there be some sort of centralised registry list. So, from staff's point of view, I think that change would basically, it would follow option 2 within the body of the staff report. And really, all that we would be doing that is different to what we originally recommended to you is we would not be pursuing the BC Housing piece.
Okay. Is somebody prepared to move that as a motion?
Yeah.
You'll move it? Okay. Moved and seconded. It's on the floor. Andy? Andy, you're on.
Well, actually, if I could...
Go ahead. You're speaking. It's yours.
Well, just on the fly, if we could get it read back, do we have a version that we could read back just prior to making comments?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a shot at duplicating it. That staff be authorised to, via an expression of interest, explore opportunities to retain an independent organisation to manage the LEMA program and to report back to council.
It's a step in the right direction.
Sure. So
It's been moved and seconded. Okay, Andy, you're on.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, and I think that does a good job of capturing some of the points he made. I mean, I had concerns about number 3 as well in terms of its language, so I'll just cut it short. I think that opens it up and achieves what we want to do. So, thank you.
Okay, Alexa?
Thank you, through you to staff. So just to grind it through my mind a little bit, if we did have this third party, are they managing the list or are they managing the whole thing? So for example, isn't the Kiwanis group building their own thing? So did they then have their own list, or would they then draw from our list, or does that just leave it, we still have time to sort out the intricacies and the details of this?
Anybody got an answer there?
Through the chair. I think really all they're doing is managing the LEMA list, at least initially. It's a bit of a stab in the dark. Maybe if we take that first step, bring someone on board and manage the LEMA list, maybe down the road it gets expanded or something. But, I don't see this as a terrible problem. It's really it's almost a sign of success that there are these units out there that frankly, originally, we didn't expect many to be built, but now there are a few. And so people are turning their attention to how they're managed. So I would say initially it would just be focused on Lima, trying to get a centralized list, trying to make sure everyone's comfortable with how that's being administered. And then down the road, council could consider other non-market projects as well.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, I think just for clarity, I think there was talk about tax returns and this and that. I think if we are going to look at things like that, we want notice of assessment. And I know at Kidsport, we look at people's notice of assessment. So there's one person who looks at them to ensure that it's validated. Everybody else doesn't, on the board doesn't get to see it. It's just one person that does the vetting to make sure that people actually qualify. And then if we can get the disabled piece in there so that we can keep a list of who needs housing that's in wheelchairs, that needs that specialized housing. And then we can, with a move towards being able to build it correctly and get the right people in the spaces.
Right.
Okay, and just, if I may follow up on that, I think we need to, in that, establish a process to create a Richmond list. It follows what you're saying. We need to know where's that list for Richmond people coming from, and how do we do that? Where do we do it, and who has the bank on it? Is that, am I there? And
Yeah.
that's why I put a stop, and I'd be looking, that's what I said, what list are we using? Are we working for Richmond people, or are we working for the province?
Yeah.
And anyhow, so
I-
if that's included in there, that's moved,
Yeah. So
seconded?
just,
Any-
can I just say one last thing? I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, through the chair. The thing is that the way it is right now, there's a whole bunch of different units, and there's a whole bunch of different operators, and everybody has to apply to every single one of those operators. That's silliness, right? I mean, it's so much better if we can have one centralized list. And the developers I've spoken to that have phoned me up out of the blue and said, can we just get people that are vetted? We don't have the ability to do this. And so if that's part of the process, and that's what staff have been directed to do, to find a way to go out and explore the independent operators, to retain someone to manage the LEMUR program. And in the end, what will end up happening is everybody can relax because the work is being done, and we don't have to expect a developer to find a needy person who has a low income. And I think we're going in the right direction.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ersick, for that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Okay, it's one more item on the agenda. With deep regret, as you well know, or you may not know, this is Mr. Joe Ersick's last meeting with us. And Mr. Ersick has been with us for well over 20 years and served us very, very well along the way. Has been our general manager for almost the whole time that he's been here, and I just want to record in the minutes, and on behalf of you and other council members, more will be said later. Thank you very much, Joe, for all your service and everything you've done for us. You've made us all better people, but more importantly, you've also made Richmond a better place for us to live in. So thanks very much, and happy retirement. And the lamb's on me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Motion to adjourn? We're adjourned. Thank you.